In today's video, we had the opportunity to sit down with Cassandra Jessee, chairwoman of her local neighborhood association and former USAID leadership member. In this video, she talks about traveling the world, her role as a leader, and what she's learned about leadership and community development along the way. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video to pick up on these gems of wisdom that she has for future leaders. And enjoy.
My name is Cassandra Jessee, and I guess I would say I'm an explorer. That takes in a lot of different facets of life. I'm an explorer through travel. That travel has been some of it personal, a lot of it professional. I've worked around the world, particularly on various development projects in the international development space, but cutting across from community development through education, a lot of youth work as well as research. I'm sort of an explorer when it comes to self-reflection and trying to think about who am I in relation to the world and how do I show up in ways that are supportive. You know, interestingly, I grew up in New Jersey, and you don't think of New Jersey as outside, but I actually grew up not so far from the Appalachian Mountains that go through New Jersey, although I do have an exit still. I think as kids, I went camping a lot and, did walks and things like that. And as an adult, and sort of my college years and then into my adulthood, getting to travel and doing so in ways that it didn't involve a lot of money, because I didn't have much money then. So you walk a lot, you might canoe or kayak and things like that, which are sort of some of my respite spaces even now. And my husband and I, sort of most notably, back in 2000, we bought an old wooden sailboat for $5,000 and we fixed it up. And we actually spent 2023 sailing down to the Bahamas in it with our kids and homeschooled the kids that year. And so, but it was a boat that we fixed up from basically the hull up. And it was just an opportunity to be outside, to learn new skills, to push ourselves. And then, I kind of consider myself a bit of a water person. So, we've done several shorter trips up and down the East Coast. And then this one going around the Bahamas was kind of our biggest journey so far. Given the current political and cultural upheaval in our country, it could be a bit overwhelming, a bit dizzying. And it's where do I start? What do I do to both feel like I'm centered and can center people around me? And there was an opportunity in our neighborhood association. They were looking for someone to step into one of the board roles. And so I'm now the chair president of the neighborhood association. So I just started that in January. And what's been fun about that, and kind of the opportunity I feel like we have, is we have a strong neighborhood, and there are some really strong foundations to build on, and there's things that we've done socially as a neighborhood association, but it's kind of was in a little bit more of occasionally doing this. We had a great block party, and we do a Halloween thing, and there's these events, but a little less threads that are consistent across the neighborhood. So this year, I'm really focusing on strengthening the bonds within the community as a modality for building our resilience. And so that's, to me, has been really exciting. Yeah, it's been rewarding to be able to meet new neighbors and to be able to see relationships starting to form, strengthening, and I've put in 2 new initiatives that have been tried in different ways in the past, but really recognizing our need to be local, to support locally, especially because we're in a federal city, and the impact of the things that are happening and the cuts that are happening on the federal side do impact the individuals that live in this city and the individuals that are in my neighborhood. There's been quite a bit of job loss and insecurity and instability that are being experienced at an individual level. So, we're looking at things like block captains. And so we've started this initiative where each block is having a captain volunteer, so a neighbor on that block, to then create just better communication, to foster some social opportunities, to help promote some safety and a safety net with each other. And then a senior committee, because they're thinking about aging in place. How do we make sure that we have the ability to stay in our homes as long as possible and do so in a way that is supportive, and recognizing ageism is an issue, and people, as a younger transient city, it is easier to for people to forget about those who've been here for a long time. So this has been a really great opportunity to build the social fabric within those that are seniors and building more social opportunities. And the two people who in particular who are leading that effort are trying to get towards a senior village that doesn't exist in our neighborhood, but it does elsewhere in the city. I feel like leadership just across the board matters in some way. But I think civic leadership, ethical leadership, the foundation comes on trust, right? So how do you build trust? And I think trust, it comes through relationships, it comes through transparency, and that ability to connect and just be present. You know, a neighbor really tragically actually just experienced an arson attempt on their house in our neighborhood. And it was, honestly horrifying to see the video of what happened. And, these are neighbors that I knew, but not super well. Sort of the passing on the street, saying hello. And then the morning after this, or afternoon after this happened, I saw, my neighbor outside, and she looked so shaken, and very understandably. And I just went up and I gave her a hug. And I'm telling you, we bonded in that moment. There was like this synergy that just happened for both of us. And I think just being present is actually part of leadership. It's just like, can you bear witness? Can you support? Can you call out? But it's that relational element of being present that helps build that trust, that builds that connection, that helps then foster some of that resilience. Like all of these are intertwined. And so, I think, so I can think on my professional side where I used to lead rather large USAID projects, so the U.S. Agency for International Development. And in some ways, I guess I've often been in the leadership role. I tend to propel there quickly, and in part because, I think in part, because I do believe that connecting with people is what matters, and trying to hold them and their space to grow. And so I tend to be that leader from under rather than the leader from over. I've read a bit about altruism and how that works. And altruism, they sort of, the research sort of shows in some ways it's a slightly false narrative, because we all get something out of the connections and relationships and the things that we do. And so you might do something for really positive reasons other than yourself, but invariably it boomerangs back to you, right, in really positive ways. And so I think when you're thinking about, should I get involved? How do I get involved? I have this opportunity to be a mentor. The dividends that will come back to you are probably greater than you might even give out and not even realize it. Yet your contributions will be invaluable, especially for these young people in which you have an opportunity to help get on a pathway that might be different than they're on right now. And so the long-term dividend on what you can provide a young person at a critical stage in their life with some of the skills and support and just somebody who cares in their life can change the world. So I spent probably a dozen years or so working on 6 different projects in Malawi. So Malawi, it's called the warm heart of Africa, and it has my heart. It really does. And my 5th project there, I had the opportunity to live there for about 3 years. And the area in which I was working is called Doa in sort of central Malawi, and very conservative values, very insulated, and actually politically marginalized as just the way the winds have gone in different directions in that country. And so they were at the very bottom, second worst outcomes in education, which is the space that I was working in, from all districts across the country. And we worked really closely with the teachers and the communities and the students directly themselves, so doing different trainings. But I would say one of the efforts we had was putting in what we called zonal coordinators and having somebody be part and parcel of the community in these sort of smaller areas across this district. So think really small state. So this really small state, we then placed team members, and they were sort of that grassroots swelling up space and people who then uplifted the members of the community to better support children in school, to help build schools that were lacking for the area, to work with the cultural groups like the Guliwankulu, who were at the time basically telling kids not to go to school, or were timing events that were important for their culture to better align with the school calendar, for example, because it was interfering with kids going to school. And this like grassroots level type of work really started to pay dividends, because we saw like a shift starting to happen in how people felt about things, where they were willing for their children to go, right? Where they were willing to put their own resources. And this like movement took some time. But by the time the project had sort of wrapped up, and we had really done a lot to like move into education structures, like the Department of Education equivalent there, they call it the Ministry of Education. So when they got into these different structures and putting things in place, they literally went from the second worst to the second best in the country in these 3 years. I think that like the small changes, the little steps, the like one person, one like meeting, one moment in time builds on each other. And that is, for me, is like really echoes around other areas. So when I think about from, kids in my school, the needs that they have, to the needs in my community here, to going back to my kids in Malawi, it's like one step at a time really gets you far. You could travel the world one step at a time, and that's what this program had really shown, is that by putting things in place that kept things on the ground and really local and really relational, it made the difference. And I've kind of carried that lesson with me. Kind of like I said earlier, is, you get so much more than sometimes you feel like you give. And while I gave a lot, I got more. And so, I both a full heart, but also just like really learning about who I am, where and who people are. And really everybody faces adversity in different ways, but when we have support, we can be more resilient in that. And so that support side, and be it a mentoring opportunity, be it working alongside your neighbor to fix a broken fence, to giving someone a hug when their house has been attempted to have burned down. These are the things that matter. I'm going to say to you, as a emerging leader and growing in your space, is about seizing opportunity, right? To recognize when there is like serendipity is knocking on your door, to seize it and take risks. I started international development because I was interested. I traveled, but my travels through Asia really gave me that, like, I want to be able to do something to uplift people who might not have the same opportunities that I have had, right? And so be it from whether circumstance or country or birth origin, I wanted to do something. So I worked in an organization. I got a job on their domestic side, but they had just acquired an international element to their organization. And so I was working my way, talking to the different leaders, and they ended up needing on one of their projects somebody to build a website. So this is back in like 1998. So websites were a little different, a little easier, learned some HTML. And I didn't know really how to build a website, but I was like, I can do it. I'll do it. And I did it. And that was the break I needed. That's how I ended up in international development, because I really just wanted to. And I believed in myself enough that I could figure it out. And I think I had built enough relationships by trying to connect with the different leaders in the international group that they were willing to take a chance on me. And so I think seize it, believe in yourself, and doors can open. And be kind.